here. At this time, I invite you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So communications, Dr. Kiltz.
We have a couple of items to share with the board and the community. First of all, the first day of the 2019-2020 school year is August 19th, so we're only 2 weeks from today away from the first day of school. School offices open today, so if parents or community members have any questions at any of the schools, they're more than welcome to come to those schools with the administrative assistants back in the offices today. Facility improvement update will be reported at tonight's meeting, providing an overview of the completed work, where we are with the budget on completed projects, and what the next 3 months of activity will bring. Director of Buildings and Grounds, Brian Kafarnis, and representatives from C.G. Schmidt, Bray Architects, and Baird will present the report tonight. And we appreciate them being here and look forward to their update. Construction updates may be viewed as well on our district website, so Kitty Goyette, our Director of Communications, does a great job in keeping that page current. So if community members are looking for further information, that they certainly can find on our district website. Summer registrations continue to come in. The district is closely monitoring the following class sizes. Kindergarten at all 3 schools, our target size is 18 to 22. At Canterbury, we're at 24 now. So 24-25. So we are making the decision to split those 2 sections into 3. So that is moving forward. At College Park, we're at 22-23. So we're also monitoring that very closely, and we're considering some options there. At Highland View, the numbers are good at this point. They're at 20, 20, and 21. The other area where we're monitoring very closely is 5th grade Highland View. Target size is 23 to 28, and right now we're at 27, 27, and 28. So we'll be looking at that as well if we continue to get a couple more enrollments before the start of the year. And certainly we'll keep the board updated on that as we go along. Several district staff members have taken advantage of summer professional development, including workshops related to race and equity. One of the workshops has been through the YWCA called Unlearning Racism. Kim Midzik and I have had the opportunity to go through the weekly workshops for the past month to look at the history of systemic and structural racism and tie the concepts back to the district's equity plan. We've also had the opportunity to attend that with Brian Van Klooster, the librarian for Greendale, and so it's been great for the 3 of us to go through that. I've also had the opportunity to attend the Government Alliance on Race and Equity. This is a series of workshops that the county government is sponsoring in order to build a team of ambassadors across their divisions to foster equity across practices and policies. They've been using a racial equity toolkit as a foundation of their work, and we'll be looking at and using those tools as well as a district as we look at our key policies and procedures during the 2019-2020 school year. Some good resources, some good tools coming out of those workshops. As part of the proactive work of the high school student equity leadership team last week, a key group of students served as peer ambassadors for incoming 9th grade students who participated in an orientation session. These peer ambassadors led the orientation session and provided tours. They'll continue to work with the incoming 9th graders over the course of the school year as part of a recommended Big Brothers Big Sister program to create a stronger sense of belonging and feeling welcomed. This is one of 2 recommended priorities that they came up with as a leadership team to make Greendale High School a more welcoming environment for students from diverse backgrounds. Finally, the steering committee for the Greendale Coalition for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion is meeting several times through August and September, including tonight. They're meeting from 5 to 9. That's where I just came from, to create a draft strategic plan that will be shared at a community alignment event on October 18th, Friday, October 18th, and Saturday, October 19th. Certainly looking forward to the continued work of that coalition as they do the planning for the strategic action as well as for that alignment event. And finally, the following donations were received by the district: $3,210.45 from the Greendale Education Foundation for various grants for youth engagement, project-based learning, bilingual evaluation resource kits. We Thinkers, and Book Buddies programs. So we appreciate the Ed Foundation for their support of those mini grants that are given to teachers and to schools. $3,275 from the Greendale Historical Society on behalf of the Al and Virginia Emmons family and the Historical Society for the Alonzo Hauser statue and base relief renovation projects at the middle school. So if you haven't noticed, we've done the flagpole, so that's been restored. And hopefully in the next couple of weeks, they're going to start working on the statue itself and doing the restoration. So that's being funded through community fundraising donations that we've received. So it's been great with the Lions Club and the GEA also being partners with that as well moving forward. So we're excited to have them as partners, hopefully, moving forward. And then finally, used equipment valued at $1,200 donated to the softball program by former coach Steve Nichols. So we appreciate that donation from Steve.
All right, thank you. Continuing on with the agenda, any comments from visitors this evening? And again, I welcome to all those who will be speaking this evening. We would like to remind you that the school board meetings are for the purpose of carrying out the business of the district, and they are official business meetings that are held in public. And through School Board Policy 186, the board allows citizens to make comments by scheduling 2 opportunities on the agenda to receive citizen comments. And in accordance with the intent of open meeting law, please be aware that although we will welcome comments from the public, it cannot discuss or debate items brought up during public comments. In order to hear from all citizens who wish to speak and to assure that the official business of the district is addressed, board policy sets a time limit for citizen comments, and we'll be adhering to that board policy and its time limits at tonight's meeting. Persons wishing to address the board are asked to come to the podium and state their name and address for the record, and comments are limited to 1 time. Individuals who will be speaking will be limited to 3 minutes or 5 minutes if representing a group of citizens, and citizen comments are limited to a period not to exceed 30 minutes. Thank you.
Jason Sabrowski, 6030 Doyle. How's everyone doing tonight? 2 topics. One actually got answered ahead of time already. And I guess I want to say thank you for what you're doing at Canterbury with splitting the class. I'm reaching out as a parent because I do have someone in kindergarten, but also other parents have reached out to me, and knowing that I had a kindergarten student going in there asked me to reach out and see what I could do, but you guys already took care of that, so that's awesome. So thank you, appreciate that. Second thing is we're about a week out on finishing with the twilight structure. I couldn't be happier with how it blends with the park there. You almost can't see it, and I'm really excited to see it in use with the picnic table area and then also the bathroom area. And it's something that I would look forward to possibly doing more of these with you guys and with Twilight in the future, and possible in other parks. So that's the other thing I wanted to kind of mention tonight. I'm really happy with how it turned out and how it's looking. So that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks,
Trustee
Jason.
Borowski.
We appreciate your partnership in getting it built as well.
Thank
So
you.
thank you.
Deanna Marriott. All right, so I have several questions for the board. This is probably my 30th time coming up here, and none of the questions have been answered, but maybe today will be the day. So what I've asked was, how many students in the high school have been suspended for having an argument in the school? I just need numbers, okay? I don't need names. How many police were called due to such arguments in the schools? When are police called on students? Because I know for my daughter, they were called just because she stood up for herself and said she didn't want to be called the N-word. So I'm just wondering if you can name or list other times police were called on students. Also, it would have been nice for me to be able to go to the steering committee. However, it was scheduled during the school board time. So I don't think that was good planning, especially when 2 of the co-chairs are here. I also see that you're going to talk about student climate. So with that, I'm hoping we're going to deal with when kids are being bullied or racial slurs are being handled. I'm going to be speaking as Paige, so I'll have my 4 minutes. Thank you. There should be counseling that should be provided for them. So this happened to my daughter in September, and to this date, no one has talked to her at all. Canterbury, you had a 5th grader that had YouTube videos that was passed around to 5th graders in Canterbury that they all saw. And what happened with that? Because I spoke to several parents who said they sent several emails to Gary and never got a reply. Kid was very upset, had to send numerous emails to the principal, who then moved the student, but nothing really was done. So if we're going to talk about climate, we need to talk about that. And sending an email out only to 5th graders doesn't deal with the circumstances, because 5th graders know 3rd graders, they know 7th graders, they have sisters, they have brother. That all should be dealt with. What is the policies on people who send out hate in racial terms to school, to students there? I also have been asked to be put on the agenda 2,700 times. And of course, I have not. I've also asked to meet with the board, and I was told that I had to meet with Gary in order to meet with the board. I would like to see that in writing, where it states that I cannot just meet with board members. Or are you telling me that Gary is a part of the board? I also want to know what has come out of the plan that was established by Gary in October. What has been the results? After Dr. Smith and Dr. Motri has been hired, there has been several more incidents that has occurred. Janice is on the committee with the students, and she was not pleased with the outcome, because being a buddy to freshmen doesn't deal with racism, okay? It doesn't deal with being called the N-word. So until we can actually rip off the Band-Aid and deal with the issues, we're going to keep seeing people here. You're going to keep having these issues. It's time now for you to do something. As I stated, I have a 4K student that's going to be starting here, so I'm not going anywhere. And I'll be watching. And so would all these other parents be watching what you guys are doing. And people all over the world are watching. I still get emails now asking me what's going on in Greendale. And it's sad to say, the same old, same old. I get emails from parents whose kids are getting bullied. Emails from parents whose kids are being called N-words. Emails from parents whose kids are being told to go back to their country because they don't speak the same language. And it's sad that they're emailing me. Why aren't they emailing you guys? That is the question. Or maybe they see how you handled the case with my daughter, and they know nothing's going to be done.
Thank you for your comments. I would disagree that nothing has been done, though. All right, seeing no additional comments, we will continue with the agenda. Next item is agenda item 4, approval of personnel. So this evening we are going to be approving an administrative appointment and teacher appointments for both part-time and full-time teachers. Any questions? All right, otherwise I'm looking for a motion to approve.
I move approval of the appointments for the teacher appointments as well as the administrative appointment as outlined in agenda item 4.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second to approve the administrative appointment as well as our teacher appointments. Any further discussion? Then I call for a roll call vote. Roll call?
Yay.
Yes.
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 And I am yes, motion carries. And we welcome Mr. Lemke to the new role of, not the new role, but in his new role as Director of Pupil Services, as Ms. McHugh Moore leaves us later this summer. Continuing on, approval of the regular board meeting minutes of July 15th.
I move approval of the regular board meeting minutes from July 15th, 2019, as outlined in Agenda Item 5.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second to approve the regular board meeting minutes. Any further discussion? Then I call for a roll call vote,
Yes.
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 and I am yes, motion carries. Next on the agenda is the approval of the 2019-2020 staff handbook. So this is the staff handbook that will go into effect for this new school year. We reviewed it at our last board meeting and had some discussion on it. Any questions or additional comments from administration?
No, we added a little bit of information at the beginning of the report regarding the standard for discipline and grievance appeals, the difference between what our current standard is, which is non-arbitrary and non-capricious, compared to just cause. And legal recommendation, administrative recommendation is that we maintain the current language as is.
So I would like to, if it's okay, address that issue. I know we talked by phone, and it sounds like the district is already following those steps, from what you said, the steps that are required for just cause. So this, I know, changed, I think, in 2012, under
11.
Or 2011, was that Dr. Hughes was the superintendent then?
Right, with the enactment of the handbook.
Okay. I would like to see the language changed back to just cause. I think we set a high standard in our district, higher than most districts, and I feel it's something that we are already following the steps, and so I would propose, and I don't know if I need to make a motion, but I would like to see it go back to just cause.
Have we had any issues in the past 7 years with the language?
When employees have concern about discipline that is issued, they have a right to the appeal process, which is part of the handbook approved by the board. And that is where the standard comes into play, as the independent hearing officer would review the administration decision. They would use that test to determine whether or not the decision at this point was made in an arbitrary or capricious way. If they find that it was not arbitrary or capricious, they would find in favor of the district. So we've had a small handful of challenges, of grievances that have been filed under 5 in that 8-year period.
Can you, being one of the new board members, can you just kind of explain or maybe further define non-arbitrary and non-capricious? I understood the difference between that, and I understand the steps of just cause, but maybe a better understanding of non-capricious and non-arbitrary.
Sure. So non-arbitrary and capricious is looking at, is it rational thought? Is it based on a rational decision that a reasonable person standard would apply? If it was arbitrary and capricious, it would be without reason, without logic to support the decision that was made. So with the, Kathy referenced that we often use those 7 tests of just cause. Those are things that you look at. Are you being consistent? Do you have policies in place? Were employees warned of their actions and potential consequences of their actions? And that is born specifically out of labor agreements, which is the just cause provisions were part of the collective bargaining agreements. When Act 10 was enacted, most districts, I believe almost all in this region, moved away from that just cause standard, which is the arbitration standard that is used, to a non-arbitrary capricious standard.
And our legal counsel's recommendation is to keep it at non-arbitrary and capricious.
It allows the board more flexibility. We still act in a non-discriminatory way. We still look at all of those factors when we're making decisions and making disciplinary action or taking disciplinary action. But it's from a review process that it's a much higher standard to enact the just cause language.
That's where I kind of go back to, is that we're already doing that, and so I don't know if I need to make a motion, or how does that go?
Right now, the action is on the handbook as is.
So if you want to make a motion to amend the handbook to a non-arbitrary and capricious, or if someone wants to make a motion to approve the handbook as is based on our previous conversation.
I motion that we amend the employee handbook to go back to the just cause language.
I second.
There's been a motion and a second to amend the handbook with just cause. So is there further discussion?
So would this mean it has to be brought back at the next meeting with the language written in?
No, we would just take the amendment and carry, so approval with the amended section.
Okay, but we don't see the wording of the amended section.
If you wanted to hold, we certainly can. I would imagine it would just be a matter of replacing non-arbitrary, non-capricious with just cause. There's no further description than replacing that statement with the other.
Okay.
How does that affect anything that we, meaning the district, would go through from a process perspective?
It could affect the district's ability to make those decisions. I think, as I said, legal counsel's review is that is not advised because it creates such a high standard that it can tie the district's hands in making management right decisions.
And I think that would concern me to move forward with the change. Personally, I would support keeping it with the non-arbitrary and non-capricious. That would be my comment.
As Julie indicated, we're bringing you our recommendation as administrative team and what positions the district best moving forward. And that would be the non-arbitrary, non-capricious standard.
What was the reason to change it after Act 10?
To allow administrative rights in making those decisions. That was part of the change that legal counsel specifically advised with changes that were enacted with the handbook.
Any other questions?
I'm just, maybe I'm not familiar with this, but I was just thinking through, I mean, Wisconsin's an at-will state as well. I mean, so is it just basically changing our policy that then changes the process that we go through?
It would affect the at-will standard, which is in place for all non-contracted employees, so non-teaching and administrative employees, because teachers and administrators currently have statutory protections within their contract. Per 118.22 and 118.24 have protections under both of those statutes. So yes,
So it's the one-pagers that we reviewed.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the way I understand it is part of the staff grievance allows for it to go to an arbitrator or a mediator?
It goes to an independent hearing officer.
An independent hearing officer, and the independent hearing officer will use our staff, wording in our staff handbook to make the determination. So by using just cause, it allows it.
It significantly increases the standard that they would review the administrative decision against to make sure that it met the standard of just cause, the 7
And then which would allow the independent hearing officer to overturn the administration's decision.
That is correct. Furthermore, in the review process, the first step is supervisory. The next step is HR superintendent, depending on the grievance. The third step in the process is the independent hearing officer. And then the fourth step for either party, if they are dissatisfied with the independent hearing officer's decision, it then gets appealed to the board. And the board then makes a decision based on that decision, whether or not to uphold it.
Okay, I'm going to play new board member again. With the independent hearing officer, it sounds like, from what you're saying, they would always fall in favor of the school district using the non-capricious, non-arbitrary language. Is that correct?
They would base it on the standard in the handbook, and as it sits now is non-arbitrary and capricious would be the standard with which they would review the decision against.
So the independent hearing officer would be deciding if there's a grievance, has the district done something?
Essentially, they're looking at, was the district reasonable in their decision? Was it a logical and fair, even-handed decision that the district made, is the standard that they're currently using.
So in my opinion, that allows administration in the district the flexibility to make those management decisions. So again, that's why I would support keeping that in the policy or in the staff handbook. Any other questions?
How many other districts use Just Cause? Are there, or do we not know?
To my knowledge, maybe one or two within the state.
Okay.
In this region, it's non-arbitrary capricious is the standard that's used.
Okay.
All right, any other questions or discussion?
Kenosha is the only district I know that uses. Just
MPS,
Cause.
Milwaukee Public Schools does. I thought South Milwaukee, but I'm not sure if I'm right on that.
I don't believe South Milwaukee does.
All right, any other questions? So there's been a motion and a second to approve an amendment to the staff handbook to move from non-arbitrary and capricious to just cause. So I'll call for a roll call vote. So
No.
No.
Yes?
Yes.
I am no. So that motion does not carry. So is there a motion to go back to approval of the staff handbook as outlined in agenda item 6 with the wording allowing non-arbitrary and capricious?
I move to approve the handbook as outlined in Agenda 6, as is.
Second?
There's been a motion and a second to approve the 2019-2020 staff handbook as outlined in agenda item 6. Any additional discussion or conversation?
I would just say if we wanted to talk through that in more detail, I think it would be good to look at what actual differences there would be. And that's going to make or break any decision I would have on changing my mind on that right now. But it doesn't seem, we had something that worked for 7 years to change it without actually doing our homework, or at least my homework.
Any other discussion or comments?
I would agree with Thor. I'd like a little, if we're going to discuss, have more in-depth discussion on it, as someone who's new to the board and trying to understand all this all at once.
Okay, and we
But
can.
not now.
I was going to say, we can do that, maybe find time when it's appropriate
Yes,
at a future meeting to have that conversation.
yes.
Okay. Any other discussions or conversations? All right, then we have a motion and a second to approve the staff handbook as is outlined in agenda item 6. Any further discussion? All right, then I'll call for a roll call vote.
Yes.
Yes.
No?
Yes.
And I am yes, motion carries. Continuing on, we are here to receive an update on the facility improvements. So as Dr. Kiltz mentioned earlier, we have members from Ray and Baird and the architect. And C.G. Schmidt. So thank you for coming, and I invite you to the table.
So we're here this evening to give a facility update. So as you mentioned, we've got Brian Brewer from Baird Financial, Dan Duerwachter from C.G. Schmidt, and Mike Hacker from Bray Architects. We've also got Brian Kafarnas, our Building and Grounds Director, here this evening to also answer any questions that we have. We've got 5 tasks in terms of the update this evening. One was giving an update regarding financing and future borrowings related to the referendum project. Number 2 was talking about progress to date for this summer. Third was looking at next steps for the next 3 months when we would do our next update. So we've got that this evening. Our fourth is talking about a budget update. So where are we versus the budget that was built out in the referendum process? And from there, talking about a couple projects that are non-referendum but fall under our facilities update, specifically with our high school football turf and scoreboard. That is a project being done this summer. So to start that, I'll give it over to Brian Brewer of Baird to talk about the financing.
Good evening. Good to see everyone.
In your board doc, it's not quite on the screen at this point, but in your board docs, I started with the 30-year interest rate trend that I've used when I've been in front of you over the past year. I think this just continues to paint the picture of the volatility in the marketplace and the uncertainty of investors. If you look at the far right of the chart, you'll see that the reason we locked in a portion of the financing earlier this year was rates moved lower from their recent highs in November post-referendum. We decided to reserve $6.8 million for later in the process because you didn't need the full amount at the time. That helps you to avoid paying the interest on that portion until you needed it. So fast forward to last week, the Federal Reserve Board lowered their target rate for the first time since 2008 after 9 successive increases, including December of 2018, so 7 months ago. On top of that, we are in the middle of a trade war, which is causing a lot of uncertainty in the market. And as of today, even this chart is outdated because rates are even lower than what I'm showing here. The 10-year Treasury hit a 1.72 today, and the 30-year hit a 2.3. And for those that don't watch that every day and every week and every month, that's extremely low, and it's the lowest points that we've seen kind of going back to the months and years immediately during the Great Recession. The Great Recession. And so it's providing you an opportunity to finalize the long-term financing at abnormally low interest costs, which will help you to reduce the tax burden of the referendum. So if we flip to the next page, I'll translate that into numbers. The goals on the left, we were targeting a 93-cent mill rate increase for debt during the referendum. We wanted to minimize the total interest cost, minimize the interest rate risk, and maximize your investment earnings. So that's why we did the phased financing approach. On the right, the progress to date at current estimates for that final $6.8 million, we're on target for a mill rate increase for debt of 88 cents, so 5 cents lower per thousand. A large part of that was the AA2 credit rating that the school district received during the last evaluation process, and we would expect to receive during the next rating process. This is two notches off of the highest that's assigned by the credit rating agency, and given the size and demographic and bedroom community nature of Greendale, you don't have a large industrial base, and that's by design. So being at AA2 is a great spot. That shows that you're taking care of the financial policies and practices that is expected of a highly rated school district. So that high rating helped us to encourage buyers to invest at lower rates. Ultimately, so far after phase 1, 2, and 3, we were able to reduce the interest cost related to the financing versus our estimate. We were conservative, but we didn't, rates have gotten better, and your demand for your bonds was very strong. So we're currently at 4.4 million through those first 3 phases. And then you'll see in that chart at the bottom, the estimate for the final 6.8 million is a rate of 2.3%. Keep in mind our estimates during referendum were 4.5%, and this last piece is at 2.3%. So that helps you to reduce interest costs by another $750,000, putting the total estimated reduction versus what you had estimated at over $5.1 million. Why is that important? It has allowed us to shorten your debt repayment by 1 year. So we were able to eliminate a principal payment in the 21st year of the repayment, and that was a $3 million payment. So we were able to avoid that and reduce the annual debt levy by roughly $100,000 to $150,000 per year for that 20-year repayment. So that's how the mill rate came in lower than the 93-cent estimate is because we're paying over $5 million less in interest cost. Okay. So the next page is the detail. I put it in there mainly so you could see how it lays out. For tonight's purposes, I don't think we should spend a significant amount, but if you just focus over onto the third box, it says market rates plus 0.15% and then 6.8 million. Day-to-date is highlighted at January 2nd. So Jonathan and I met last week and a half ago, and we talked about the pros and cons of waiting versus, the plan called for mid next year, but with rates as low as they are and what the Fed did last week and where long-term rates are, we thought it would be best to get on a timeline to lock in this final 6.8 million. With your direction, we will have paperwork back to you for either a November or a early December board meeting, either your second November or your first December, which will allow us to lock in and close in 2020.
And there's no guarantee that the rates will stay as low as 2.3%.
There is no guarantee, correct.
Is there any advantage to locking in sooner than November and December?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And if you recall that we split the borrowings and that helped us to gain an extra 400,000 of avoidance back in January, February. Part of that was we designated the 2019 amount to 10 million or less. So if we need to close just after January 1st of 2020 with this final 6.8 million. So, the November date is probably the earliest to lock in after January 1. So we will get everything ready to go and prepped for the board meeting such that at the earliest date that we can sell it to investors to lock it in for a January 2nd closing date, we will do that. And the final slide is the sample timetable, but it's effectively blank. It was really just to give you an idea of the next steps that would come leading up to that November action for the board to lock in those rates.
And any concern so we'll receive another bond rating in that November, December timeframe. Any concern that the bond rating will change given that we did borrow the 27 million?
Again, a very good question. Typically, when we post-referendum, so last November, leading into that first credit rating, they're going to look at the full 33.8. So when they gave you the AA2 assignment, they know that you're going to borrow the remaining 6.8. So I don't have concerns on that, especially after the meeting that Jonathan and I had regarding how you finished up, or how you are estimating to finish up the June 30, 2019, it won't raise flags for them as a credit rating agency, especially knowing the favorable environment and the lower interest costs that you're locking in on the total project. So you're paying the debt off a year earlier. Credit rating agencies love that. So I do not have a concern.
All right, thank you. Any other questions regarding the financing?
Really good news.
Yeah, thank you.
Really good news.
So then we'll turn it over to Dan to talk a little bit about where we are with construction to date.
My name is Dan Director. I'm a senior project manager at CG Schmidt. I'm the one heading up the Greendale referendum project. So I think this is the first time I've met the board fully. So we can start Canterbury. The lot got paved last week. They striped it over the weekend. This week we're putting the fencing in, moving some hoops around, and working on the biopond. The map that you see up there is kind of what the site's going to look like when students return on the 19th. Kind of showing where our construction limits will be, but the bulk of the lot and the hard surface play will be ready for students. At Highland View.
With the construction at Canterbury, will the baseball fields be affected, baseball, softball fields?
The fields that are next to the parking lot will be open and operational. They've been actually using them during the summer as well.
And in the past, 4 soccer fields have used that grass space. It looks like we're going to lose one.
You're talking
gonna lose
Highland
2.
View,
2.
the soccer fields at
2
Highland
of
View?
the kindergarten through 2nd grade soccer fields.
I had a question as well, and this will probably pertain to all of the elementaries, but it's in regards to the safety of the buildings. I noticed that the entrances, they have been moved, or they will be moved. Are the same steps being taken place as what we've had before with security and so forth for the entries?
Yes, both entries will be installed this week. They didn't make it out today, but they're scheduled to start tomorrow. And they'll have the same card readers, auto openers, and cameras that they have at the current entrance right now.
Canterbury in particular has really good access to who's approaching the building now because of this construction, correct?
They will.
They will be having, okay.
They will.
So some of those sight lines are part of the new construction.
Correct.
Okay.
Um,
John, to answer your question, this year you'll lose 2 because of the silt fencing. Once the silt fencing is done and we repair the green space, we'll probably get 1 back. So there'll be 3.
Okay.
And then they're changing the orientation to maybe get 4. But yeah, this year will be 2 short.
And that's at Canterbury, Brian?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Brian.
All right, at Highland View, landscaping's ongoing. They're grading out the new soccer fields. As we speak, they seeded the high one. They'll be spreading the hay over that later this week. And as we mentioned, the new main entrance to Highland View will be going in tomorrow. And then we got power switchovers for both Canterbury and Highland View for next week. At the middle school,
Any questions?
Yeah. Why was there a retention pond put in, 2 actually, instead of using a storm drain?
it was a civil engineer with the review comments from the village and MMSD.
Okay. Are those going to be fenced in? Fenced around like we see on Loomis and College?
They're both dry reservoirs, so they're not going to hold water 100% of the time. They're only there for stormwater purposes. So right now, neither one of them are planned for fencing.
Okay.
We do have some guardrail that we're putting up between the parking lot and the pond at Highland View just because of the proximity, just to keep cars out of the pond in the winter. But it's just the guardrail at this point.
And, I'm sorry, which pond are you referring to where there's going to be the guardrail?
It's in the southwest corner off of 51st Street.
Okay.
We're also moving the basketball hoop nearest the pond, moving it further away. And we're also putting a screen on the pipe as well.
So the drawing that we're looking at, can you help us orientate
Just
toward?
below the purple lines on the south lot.
One pond located here, and one pond located over here. Dry pond.
And the first one that you pointed to, that's one that's going to have the guardrails because of its proximity to the parking lot.
Correct.
I've had community members ask me the purpose of that sidewalk. In fact, I know a friend voted against the referendum because of that sidewalk. Can you help me understand, and then I can share with community members what's envisioned with how that sidewalk is going to be used surrounding the purple?
I think that's for during drop-off, so students can get off onto the walk so they're not walking through the
Walking
parking
through,
lot.
okay,
So the sidewalk is in the gray.
Correct.
yeah.
Okay.
So it's safety
Sure.
passage for the students.
Sure. And all the drawings we've seen previously have that new lane as being called a bus lane. And I happened to see it just yesterday, and it says parent drop-off. So which is it?
That's getting blacked out. That shouldn't have been painted.
Oh, really?
They took our signage plan literally and put some words down that
Oh,
shouldn't have had to.
Okay.
They're getting the white out.
Yep.
I see.
The blackout.
I was going to say
funny.
blackout, probably.
So when we look at the drawing that you have in the packet, the bus lane, the bus drop-off is properly noted.
On the north, correct.
Okay.
And parent drop-off is the south lot, and they're separated.
Okay.
Dan, will you talk a little bit about the electrical connection that's going to happen and why that's so important to the schools?
Sure. As part of the project, we had a larger electrical service to both of these elementary schools, mainly because of the size of the additions and the added load for the air conditioning that's going in. The current size of the service wouldn't have been able to handle either. We've been working with We Energies and our electrical gear supplier to expedite that equipment and get it here for the summer. And it actually just arrived on a semi-truck this morning. So we are in the process of getting that installed and fitting into We Energy's schedule to do the switchover, which as of right now is next week, barring any storms. So try and keep the storms away until middle of August, and we'll be in good shape.
So while our goal is to have air conditioning for the start of the school year, if we have some storms that take We Energies away from this project, there may be some delays in making those connections. And so air conditioning will be available. It's just a matter of when through this first 2-3 weeks that we'll have it available. Once they turn on the switch as well, they'll have to do some calibration with the air conditioning units and distributing the air and do some testing with it. So even if we have air, it may not be perfect when we turn the switch, and they'll have to do some balancing as well. So that's where I'm asking the community and our teachers and staff to be flexible and patient with us as we work with C.G. Schmidt and the guys who are doing the work.
Question, and it's not to rush it or anything, but do we have consideration for like weekend work if there is rain? Is that a possibility, or is that something that's kind of off the table right now?
We've been working lots of weekends.
You have,
I've noticed.
The We Energies crews right now have us set up off hours for a shutdown just to minimize the impact. And I guess we'll just see how things go. And we're supposed to do a little shutdown at the high school tomorrow, and we've been canceled twice already. So hopefully the third time's a charm. So we're in the hands of We Energies at this point.
So all the field construction will be done before the 19th, correct?
The soccer fields will be basically graded out and seeded, and they'll just be a growing.
Right.
We'll be working on the ball field in the corner probably the week of the 19th, but it's a construction area for the growth and whatnot. It's not going to be a student area.
Yeah, that's nowhere near.
So all the parking lots will be accessible and walkable. That's where our focus was for the 8 weeks we had this summer.
A community member asked me how many new classrooms on the Ramsey Eastway corner, and I didn't remember the number.
6.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions on Highland View?
I just want to comment, I took a little impromptu drive-through to all of the schools today and actually walked in a couple of them to check it out, and I know we're not finished talking about the other schools yet, but I'm really impressed with the work that's being done. The middle school, they were working on the bleachers, the floor's done. The high school, they were working on that. The Canterbury looks a little different from across the field right now. I'm sure that'll change a little bit later. But I'm just really amazed at how much work you guys have done in a short amount of time.
All right, thank you.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
All right, middle school, we have flooring going down in the library today, as well as they got a bunch of stairwells. They're probably halfway through with all the stairwells to be replaced, so we'll be pushing that for the rest of the week and maybe a little into next week. The STEM area, the new light fixtures and the clouds are going in, but the flooring and the painting is all complete. The nurse area, the finishes are wrapping up there this week, as well as orchestra, and ceilings in, wall panels are going on, casework's in. So we're in the finishing touches mode, headed downhill. So. And as you mentioned, the bleachers are going in. Those arrived on Friday. Scoreboards as well will be going in this week, so if we don't get it Friday, we'll be hopefully wrapping that all up on Saturday. All right, high school, the chiller set up on the roof. That was a pretty big structural exercise that had to happen there. I don't know if you saw it up there.
What was that again?
The chiller.
Oh,
or
the chiller.
New chiller for all the air conditioning added to the high school. That's in place. It'll be started up this week and probably commissioned next week. The new floor in the lower gym at the high school, they're putting the final coat on Wednesday, and then that'll be curing for the rest of the week and through the weekend. We got a few more wall panels to put up in the gym and hang a few other wall items, but that one's about done as well.
It appears that there's a new divider in the gym, is that correct?
There is a divider curtain in the lower gym, correct?
That can actually lower and go back up.
Yes, it can.
That's at the high school.
Correct.
Forgive the sarcasm. It's just been there for more than a decade and hasn't been used. So that's very exciting.
I just also want to comment, in looking at the room, I don't know whose choice it was to specifically to change the colors in the gym, but it used to be kind of this green, room that you go to, and now it looks really open and inviting, and so whoever came up with the color scheme and the painting, the way it's along there, I think it really is an inviting gym now. So thank you to whoever did that.
And I think to add to that piece, we talk about the gym finishes here, so those are actually added items through our maintenance facility budget, so outside of the referendum dollars.
Okay.
But while this work was being done, obviously the majority of costs are HVAC related, and then our construction for the new entrance, which will be coming, but those finishes are coming from kind of a different bucket budget-wise.
Right, so that's kind of a quick summary of the 5 buildings. We're kind of in the home stretch. We'll get the students in, and we're gonna probably take a pause for about a month or so to get the core and shell bid package out and awarded, and we'll probably be starting construction on the additions early October.
What's the update on College Park?
Yeah, College Park, we basically put in a temporary electrical service to handle the new HVAC equipment there as well. There's a power shutdown on Thursday to tie that in so that equipment can run. But I think the addition is still slated to happen south part of the building.
Correct, and Mike will talk to that and what we're looking at doing. So the renovations and construction will happen at College Park. What we weren't able to do was any of the external site work because that's in a floodplain. We did request support from the county to fix the culvert going underneath College, and right now the response back from the county was they don't have the funds. As the property owner there, we need to cover those costs, and in my opinion, it's not appropriate for a school district to pay for road repair. So we're not moving forward with that plan to improve College Park or College Avenue and the culvert. So we'll just modify the plan on the outside, go with what we currently have, and then do the renovations on the inside. So that's where our focus is going to be, are the renovations on the inside. You'll hear from Mike, I think, on what those plans are going to look like.
I was also going to say I'm pleased to see one thing that they are working on is the actual walkway. They were tearing that out today, and I know that was somewhat hazardous for people as they approach the building. There were a lot of holes and bumps and whatever, so I saw them pulling that out today, so that's good to see that that's going to be updated.
Poured tomorrow.
What's that?
We'll be pouring them tomorrow.
Good. We put our feet in it? No. I didn't say that, did I?
So in terms of next steps, I think we'll turn it over to Mike Hacker to talk about some of the design.
All right, well, good evening, everybody. It's good to see everyone here and new board members. Welcome. Obviously, you've had an opportunity to see a number of the renderings that have come out over the past couple months. Kitty's done a nice job of starting to unroll those. You've seen some of them on some job site signs out in front of the school. So when Jonathan asked that we spend a few minutes talking to you tonight, we thought maybe instead of just showing you a lot of the same images that you've seen, that we'd do something a little different and maybe do some 3D stuff with you and show you a few things and We have a lot more of this back at the office that we can share, so we thought we cherry-picked just a couple for tonight. And then from there, if you'd like others or have questions about other areas, more than happy to provide some of these. And so what we thought we would do is really look at Canterbury and the high school, okay? And then after we look at those, I'm happy to answer questions that you might have about any of the other schools at this point, okay? What we're going to do is look at what we call panoramas, okay, which would be basically a stationary three-dimensional view where we can then spin around the space, all right? So we can't walk through it in this model, but we can just spin around and see what's happening in each of these areas. And we thought we'd start on the exterior of Canterbury. We are at the extent of this mouse wireless distance here, so hang with me. And so a couple things. So I'll show it on the screen here. When we get to the high school, I did bring one in a headset that we can hand around, so you guys can take a look in the headset. And then just for fun, before we leave, I'm going to hand out this for you to take with you tonight. So they're QR codes that you can just scan with your phone and then look at all these same panoramas on your phone after tonight's presentation, okay? So certainly ask questions as we go through these, but you're more than happy to obviously take these with and spend some more time with them, okay? So this is the exterior of Canterbury. This is kind of the same perspective that you see in the still rendering out of the main entry. Let's see if I can get my mouse here. Just to the left, you're seeing the existing building here. That's the existing gym box. And I may have to be mobile, so hang with me. Can you hear me okay? Or?
Can you take a microphone?
Take the mic. Yep.
Don't drop.
Take your mic.
Yep. Okay, so what you're seeing on the left side there is our existing gymnasium. And just beyond that would be the current main entrance. So right now, as you're familiar, kind of walk around the gym to get to that main entry. This was the question, I think, Kathleen, that you had asked about better sight lines of the parking lot. Big improvement at Canterbury is a shift of the main offices. And so what you're seeing here off to the far right are our new administrative offices. Okay, and so our receptionists will have exterior windows looking right out at the parking lot and all the folks approaching the building. Okay, so they'll be able to monitor bus and parent drop off. They'll be able to see people as they walk up to the secure entry. Okay, so much better sight lines. We had a nice secure entry sequence in our existing building. We're still going to have the secure entry sequence in this building, but the nice thing here is we have far better sight lines of who's approaching.
And is that the woods on the far right then? So is there a view that way as well for people approaching the building?
Correct. So off to the right and beyond are the woods. It's the middle school further beyond to the right. This model, like I said, we certainly don't render all of that, but here would be the woods here to the left as well. Okay, just to kind of give you that perspective. This would be then the space in between, kind of that glass section right in the center, is our new cafeteria.
Nice.
Okay, and so the goal there was to have a lot of transparency, bring a lot of natural light into that cafeteria. I think that was mission accomplished. As part of that, we're also mindful of kind of creating some covered entry. So you're seeing the canopy reach out from the main entrance. And you're also seeing us wrap that canopy across the front of the building. And we're building in a couple tiers here for students to sit and wait for rides. Okay, and so you'll be covered, be able to be outside and wait for some rides, which I think is a nice feature on the front of the building.
Will that be right up to the windows?
It would be right up to the building. Yep, yep. The second image that I'll have to show you is then of the same space, but just from the interior. So in this view, we're basically standing in the center of the cafeteria. It's at night. Just joking. Bad joke, sorry. So standing in the center of the cafeteria, this is looking out that same set of glass we were just looking in. Okay, and so from this perspective, obviously, no cafeteria chairs or tables or anything in this rendering, but you can imagine a number of tables and chairs within. You're seeing our main vestibule here. This is our secure vestibule, so you see a set of doors on the left side, which would lead us into the main office, and then a set of doors out of the main office here into the cafeteria. Okay, so we have our secure entry sequence built in. On the right side of the image, you're seeing an access that reaches over to the existing gym that is proposed to be renovated as part of the project. Okay, and so the nice thing about this is we tried really hard to find a way for the cafeteria really to be a community classroom, a space where we can lock off the rest of the building and still provide access to the cafeteria, to the gymnasium, and to some of the amenities like bathrooms and storage and things off of these spaces without providing access into the rest of the school. Okay, so the nice piece about this is we're able to lock off the other doors, kind of our current main entry doors, if you can visualize that, which would be back here. We can lock off these doors and then lock off the rest of the school. So a nice ability to manage that. Here, featured with this element, you're not seeing some signage. We'd envision some cafeteria signage potentially over this, but the overhead door that leads into the servery or into the kitchen. Okay, right there. So we'll be able to serve directly out. We work closely with the food service team to think about student movement as they queue to pick up their hot lunch and where our compost and recycling and garbage stations are going to be, and spent a lot of time talking about the flow of those students through the building. But then again, up high, very excited that we are able to integrate clear story windows around the perimeter of this space. So again, we're going to have a lot of natural light coming down into this cafeteria. So really, I think a nice enhancement to this project. Now,
that fits nicely with the library too.
I agree.
It kind of carries that theme through.
I
so.
agree. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So we did not bring similar views for Highland View or for College Park, but again, we can provide those if you'd like. Highland View, very similar goal in terms of a new cafeteria, a lot of natural light, basically 1.5 stories of glass, bringing a lot of natural light into that new Commons cafeteria. College Park, a little different in that we're renovating existing space for the cafeteria, relocating it, expanding it. It's more centrally located. I think it'll function far better as a commons for that school, but it'll feel a little different in that we're renovating existing space versus building new space like at the other two schools. Okay?
And just to confirm, this is more for the administration, this would allow school to happen on Election Day, since this can be closed off.
Correct.
That way our school calendar doesn't need to be as disrupted as it has been.
Absolutely. We can align it more with districts
Right.
and professional development and do sharing of professional development opportunities.
So I thought I'd shift over to the high school. And so we have 3 images here at the high school. One is in the library where we're standing now. The second image is at the interior of the music addition. And then the third is a view of the exterior of the gym lobby addition onto the building. Okay, so this first image is of the library. Purposefully, this image is basically standing where I am right now. Okay, and so the thought here is that we create an image that would give you a perspective of obviously the room that we're standing in. So what I'd like to do, and this is where it all falls apart and everybody gets distracted. So I'm going to hand around the headset for you to try on. Okay, and it is oriented to the room. Okay, so as you look in this direction, you are looking at the windows. Okay, I'll let you go
Students go
Yep.
first, yeah.
Okay, so in this image, we'll start by facing your direction. A key part of this project was really to try to think of this library less as a traditional, quiet book depository, right, within a school, and more to make it a destination for lots and lots of different uses. Certainly still have books, and I'll show you we have some space designated to be quiet, areas for designated study, but the hope was that we'd have students spending more time here before class, before school, after school, and to do so, one of the first things we looked at doing was open up as much of the wall as possible to that corridor. Okay, and the whole goal was, as you come in the main entry and are standing in the PAC lobby, you could start to see the library. Basically, it starts to spill out towards that space, meaning we're going to be pulling some furniture out that way and some of the finishes out to touch that lobby space. Okay, and so what you're seeing here in this image, the columns in the foreground you're seeing just beyond the screen here. And we are in the far distance of the rendering, you're seeing the brick wall. That's the brick wall across the hallway from us here. Okay, just to make sure everybody is oriented. So as we look at this, what we tried to do is think of almost a gradient of types of uses. So as we start at the corridor, we try to have more potentially higher top tables where you have maybe you're standing around, maybe you have a couple students spending some time before class or after class. And then as you get into the space, we start to get into kind of smaller scale, maybe more soft seating, something that might be more traditional to a contemporary library space. So in the distance here, you're seeing the lobby. That's the glass beyond your existing lobby. We have designed in correlation with a relocated business classroom, which would happen just outside of these walls here. Adjacent to that would be the new school store. Okay, and we've worked closely with the district to envision lots of different uses for that school store outside of just selling merchandise, potentially even being utilized for performance nights where we can sell some merchandise or even some concessions. We've spent some time even talking about it being a destination for refreshments during the school day as well. So looking for opportunities to try to draw students or magnet students down by having some activity at this end of the building. Okay. As we look to the right here, which would basically be behind Dr. Kiltz in this direction, we've basically designed our two sections of the library. You're seeing the green wall with the feature logo and a glass wall on either side of that. That glass wall is proposed to be a movable glass wall. So during the day, if we wanted that space wide open, we slide that glass open and students can spill in and out of that. If we needed quiet space for class purposes or even testing was another reason, we can close that glass wall and then dedicate the further section behind that to the quiet area, if you will. Okay.
So how soundproof is that glass? Is it soundproof?
There's not much that is fully soundproof, but
So-
yeah, it is. I wouldn't say it's as soundproof as that. Certainly that concrete block wall or an insulated wall, but it is a system in a track that locks at the ceiling and at the floor. So it is a insulated or two panes of glass. So I think it will function quite well. Yep. The wrapping around that portion of the library, so starting here on the right and kind of going down and then beyond in the background, we have 6 different sized study rooms wrapping around, kind of small group study rooms ranging up to, I think, almost 8 people can fit in one of them. So varying sizes and, again, giving students access to space to study on their own or do group projects and, again, come to the library but have access to different types of spaces. Those would all be proposed to be outfitted with technology. So we'd have basically monitors in each of those rooms so students can plug in and be collaborating on projects together in each of those study rooms. We've thought that there would be an opportunity with this green wall to kind of create an anchor, visual architectural anchor within the space. It's a room that serves lots of different purposes, including even board meetings, right? So we had it envisioned even that this could be the backdrop to some of those meetings, right? So in addition to kind of our selfie screen that we have here, another opportunity, again, from an image standpoint, to have something branded behind for key presentations or your signing days with students or whatever that may be. So tried to develop that into the project as we looked at the design. As we continue to rotate, you're seeing all that great natural light coming in from the courtyard. So that is proposing along this entire wall to replace each of those sections of storefront with all new glass storefront for that entire stretch, and also providing some access out to that as well.
Is that courtyard access today?
No.
It's available. You could get out there, but it's just not used as. Is it?
It's very difficult to get out there.
And I see our 2 students shaking their heads saying they've never been outside. Okay. Thank you, Emma.
And then just to wrap us, to complete the full circle here, in the back right corner, which would be back in this corner here, adjacent to a couple of the existing office spaces, would be the kind of central librarian staff location. Okay, so we were thoughtful about how to locate that individual or those individuals in a way that they can observe the entire library. Also back them up to resource space and office space for them as well. So that's what's located in the right. And then just some fixed casework. Certainly bookshelves, you're seeing us wrap some along what will be this left wall, and then you see smaller stations along a few of the other walls. And then the remainder will fall into furniture solutions. So we'll look at maybe basically shorter bookshelves, more of them, on casters, on wheels. So we can move them out of the way and again, be able to fully rearrange the room however we might see fit.
So will all of this current, all the current bookshelves will be gone?
Correct, yep.
And there's no need for a new computer lab, or I see the Apple Macs over there. That's
Dr. Kiltz, I'll speak to.
No, not with the capacity of the new laptops they're getting, devices, so.
okay. So that it'll all be repurposed. Great, thank you.
Did you say, is there, maybe I missed this, is there a large screen like this that'll be in here for projecting as
Yes.
well?
Yep, we didn't point that out, but it's proposed to drop down in front of that logoed
Oh.
decal. We've also talked as a group about utilizing some additional technology so that you can present both to the audience as well as to the board at the same time.
Nice.
So we had talked about maybe using some monitors on carts and set them up in a way so that you can support presenting in both directions.
That's good.
Yep.
I know on some of the tours that we went through during the two-year process of reviewing and facility meetings, a lot of the libraries were used as media and maker spaces, so digital and other things of that nature. So is this being kind of thought about from a design as well to make sure that if those needs kind of grow, that there's opportunities for that?
I think so, yeah. And as we've talked, one of the main focuses was for the space to be as flexible as possible so that we can adapt it over the course of the day or even over time. Really, you see a lot of open space, and that suggests that we're going to have a lot of furniture as the driver of the end solution. So I think there are a lot of the goals for how best to support that type of education really is going to be how are we collaborating and what are the resources we need to support that collaboration. The nice thing about all the study rooms around the perimeter, and again, I think we have 6 of them in total. And they're of varying sizes. Again, those can adapt and be repurposed very easily. So if we needed a dedicated space for like robotics equipment or something like that, we certainly have some room set up that could support that very easily going forward.
And then based on habit, electrical was one of my questions, just because I saw a lot of tables, and I'm assuming people are going to be using laptops and other things, and the batteries last a lot longer than they used to, but having ability to plug in and do those types of things.
Yep. Students
Sometimes.
are supposed to charge every night, Thor.
Yeah, okay.
Go home, right?
So I had a question about the lighting, because we just obviously redid this lighting in here not too long ago. Is this going to be repurposed in any sort of a way?
And that's a very good question. I'm just not the right person to
Okay.
answer that. Dan, I don't know, can you speak to that, or not yet?
Purpose all lighting at the middle school this summer, so I imagine the same thing will go for the high school.
Okay.
Thank you, good question. And you,
So with the AP testing, see that glassed off area? AP testing would occur back in that space. That will hold quite a few, yeah. So,
It's big enough to hold the staff meetings, so it's big enough to hold it.
And the microphones here.
Yeah,
70.
can you use your mic? We didn't hear you, Kim.
Answer it better. It's big enough to hold the staff meetings, so it'll be big enough to hold an AP test, given the numbers.
yeah.
so just out of respect to time, any other questions on the library?
That's good.
Okay. The other 2 images, the next one is of the music department. So the music department, we are doing a combination of renovation to the existing department as well as an addition onto that. The image that you're going to look at would be in what we're terming basically the music department commons. Okay, it's the open space just outside of all of those rooms. And so what we've found is that when you have multiple rooms, 3 classrooms with large groups of students entering and exiting at very similar times, it does help having almost like a small lobby space. So they're not all kind of exiting into a hallway at the same spot. It's also an area of the building that students spend a lot of time before school and after school. So we found that if we can create some space that could support them being supervised and give them kind of a sense of place, some identity at that end of the building, we've seen a lot of positive kind of feedback from clients with this type of space. And so it is a shift, and we did spend some time with the department touring some other schools just to take a look at how they used similar space, and we took a lot of good feedback into where we landed here. What you're seeing here is beyond would be what is our southern entrance to the building. Okay, so currently off of the back parking lot, if you can envision that, we have quite a few students and staff that come in that back entrance. I say back entrance, but it's actually like the second highest used entrance in the school, but really has no identity. There's no real great wayfinding, and so we found that this may be a good opportunity to enhance some of that as well. And so what you're seeing beyond this glass wall is a renovated entry into the south end of the building. Off of that corridor, then, we're creating the glass wall that you see, which has 2 sets of doors on either side of a 2-sided glass display case. Okay, and so you may have heard your music department is quite accomplished, and we have lots of nice recognition and trophies and photography from some great events, and we've thought that this would be a great opportunity to feature some of those pieces at this end of the building. And so what you're seeing centered between the doors would be basically trophy cases, if you could envision it that way, that would allow us to display a lot of their memorabilia and kind of trophies and things. To the left here, you're seeing the door into the band, the new band room. This is a new construction addition onto the building. You're seeing just to the right of that some glass that is into our band teacher's office. So a key component of this is being sure we have supervision of this end of the building. So a number of our offices here will have windows basically looking directly into this open space. We then have the orchestra and choir room here and then down this hall to the left. Here we're transitioning from new into existing, so that's why you're the architecture and the columns, we're starting to work around some of those. This corridor that gets a little bit dark in this image leads us to the back of the stage. Okay, so the other benefit of this is that it really starts to function almost as a green room for performance nights, right? So you can have students staged. We had talked about having some speakers and some monitors showing the video of what's happening on the stage so that our performers who aren't on stage can be in this area prepping and ready to enter onto the stage. And then behind this wall, we have some additional storage. And so again, that's going to be a common theme for any music department anywhere, is having lots of storage. That just is inherent to that department. And so a lot of instrument storage and stage set storage, and I think a nice addition to the project there. Okay. And then last is our gym entry. And so this is a project that I think proportionately is quite a bit smaller than a lot of the other projects that we're doing across the district, but I think really is going to have be a really nice enhancement to the flow. Yes? They will still have practice rooms. Yep. Good question. So this is an addition that comes off of the existing gymnasium. Okay, and so one of the things that was evident in the study phase, as well as a lot of the feedback we got from the community, was just kind of the long distance and a bit of a convoluted path you had to travel to get to competition events in the gymnasium. And so this addition will come off of our existing parking lot. So I'll spin to the left here. So you're seeing the parking lot. Here's the football stadium in the distance. And so what we're proposing here is, in essence, just a lobby addition onto this side of the building. Okay, and so we're picking up on the same metal panel that you see kind of on the upper end, up at the top side of the gym, bringing that down into this entrance. A lot of glass, opportunity for signage. That way it's as intuitive as possible to visitors. So you'd see Glendale High School athletics. We have an opportunity to kind of see it here for a graphic, maybe the Panther logo.
Will there be, I'm assuming because there's a new entrance, will there be handicap spaces that are allocated for that area?
Yes, yep. So this view, same spot, just pulls us back a little bit. So one of the other key parts of this is providing more plaza space to support this entry. So not just getting ADA spots or parking spots closer to the door, but getting safe space to stand and wait. And so here you're seeing a nice plaza addition that leads you right up to that new main entry. We'll have signage on the inside. We've talked about some opportunities for, again, some banners and things just to give that space some identity to visitors as they come in as well.
Are there any parking spots that are being lost?
Brian, I don't believe so, no. Yep.
So you enter on the east end of the gym?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yep.
And then this also allows to kind of block off that area for the rest of the school, if needed to?
Correct, yep. So the other piece that we're working through are logistics of bathroom access and some of the game night things. We have some pieces we're working on of potentially relocating the concessions within the gym so we can kind of have better control of that. And so no bathrooms as part of this, as currently proposed. I think it does tie into the stair. If you can envision, there's a stair there that leads up to the cheer section, if you can picture that, kind of the upper bleacher section. So we can feed off of this lobby up to those bleachers as well, or up to that gym. So I think the nice piece of this is it still sets the stage for some of the master plan pieces of tying together the pool and some of those other pieces that we had talked about in some of the early master planning. So with that said, I know it's not nearly as fun as interest rates, quite as good a news as he does, but thought obviously tons of depth to get into when you get into design. So we thought maybe just tease a few of these things out. Again, I will pass these out, please take some time. It's very simple with your phone. You just take a photograph of it and it should just bring you right to a website where you can do the same panoramas that we just looked at as well.
And most of the stuff that you shared with us tonight is new construction that will happen next summer.
Correct. Yep. Correct. Yes.
In the fall. It'll start in October.
Yeah, the additions will start in October.
But be
Okay.
Renovations
completed,
will be summer.
Okay.
but be completed for the start of the next school year.
Yeah.
Very nice.
With respect to College Park, I know we talked about that one, and
Yep.
essentially the site work's not happening. What ended up happening with the classrooms? Are those moved to the back of the building, or are they in the front of the building now?
They're going to be on the south side of the building,
South side.
so
Okay.
out of the flood zone.
Got you. That's what I thought was happening. I just wanted to make sure. I know there's a lot of moving parts.
And actually, the team at College Park appreciated that more than on the
Principal
front
and
side.
mentioned to me
It
this.
ends up being a much better flow educationally for the students. So I think they're excited with the plan that we've proposed moving forward with those classrooms on the backside.
Great. Thanks.
So with that said, any other questions for me before I turn it over to Jonathan?
Nice work.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
for.
Thank you all.
All exciting stuff.
So if we can, we'll flip back to our presentation document and look at our budget to date. Thanks for the help with that.
Can you advance it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Keep going. We'll let you know when to stop.
Stop. stop there.
All right. So our budget update. So 33.8 million for the referendum. The construction budget's 29.3 million. And the phase one was about 25% of that total budget, so about 7.4 million. So the majority of our work is next summer, as we expected. The construction contingency, so one of the things we were looking at was, are we on track with the budget? So our contingency for items that would come up while we're doing the work is at 1.4 million, and what's been used to date is 250,000, so about 18%. So we're trying to compare those numbers. If we've used 25% of our construction budget, we want to be below 25% of our contingency. And a lot of that has been site work related. So every time you're digging up asphalt and concrete and changing grading and looking at water, floodplain, or not floodplain, but water issues on sites, there are changes, and that's what we've found at Highland View and Canterbury. That we've had some modifications. So that would be the bulk of the contingency that we've done to date.
How does it work if there is extra money from the 1.4 a year from now? How does that, in terms of, does that go back to the taxpayers?
Mm-hmm.
Do we find
Yeah.
another small project that we've always
Yeah.
wanted to do and now we can do it? How does that work?
Either or. So we would come back to the board and have some conversation
Mhm.
regarding the use of that money. Now, there are some secondary projects, some items that we've passed up on in order to make sure that we stay on budget. And so we could come back to some of those secondary proposals, share those with you, share those with the teams at the schools, and make some decisions that way.
Okay, thank you.
It would just need to fit in line with the verbiage of the referendum and what was approved.
That's why I asked the
Meeting.
question, yeah.
Mhm. Yep,
Yeah.
yep, absolutely. If you could proceed to the next slide then. So our schedule update for the next 3 months, I think I can give that one to Dan to talk a little bit about what we'll be looking at up from August through October.
Yep, as Liz mentioned, we're going to have a little pause for the month of September, but that's because we got the bid documents for the core and shell, the structure and closure of the additions will be coming out in a couple weeks, days.
As soon as possible.
I think middle of August, we should be getting those documents. So those will go out to the street. Those will get out a few weeks for bidding and scope confirmations, and then we'll be looking to award those bidding from August through October, getting the key contractors on board so we can get in the ground and going. And then bid package 3 is basically all of the mechanicals and the finishes for the addition space as well as the renovations. That'll be the third step. And we're anticipating that for October through the end of the year, getting that bid out so we can finalize our GMP and get all contractors under contract for January. And then construction timeline will be in the ground in October. And basically substantial completion August of 2020.
Yeah, right.
Crazy to think that it's going to be done that soon.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think that's where the community really needs to be aware that starting in October, this will look more and more like a construction zone.
Yep. And we'll have all of the addition areas separated with fences, and we'll be kind of living in our different areas. But we'll try and save as much of the tie-in work for off hours or non-school days. But yeah, it'll be busy during the day.
I was going to say, how does that work with like the traffic patterns and so forth when school's in session?
We schedule our deliveries for either before people come in or during the day. So we know the busy times in the morning and the afternoon, and we just stay away.
Okay, stay away.
So then the non-referendum construction update, so the football field turf. So we are nearing or at completion of that project right now and gearing up for, we'll have our fall athletic season starting up now, so we'll be ready for that. As well as, if we go to our next slide, our scoreboard. The scoreboard cost was covered through donations to the district, so we're very grateful for that. If we go to the last slide, just to highlight that. So the stadium turf was not part of the $33 million referendum. That's Fund 41, which is for our long-term maintenance plan. And so dollars were set aside out of that to be able to do this larger project this summer. And then with the scoreboard, it's kept in a donation account. And so those dollars are being allocated as the bills will come in for that, and that's being completed.
What was the cost of the turf?
So the cost of the turf was $475,000.
And what was the expected life of that again? I know it's a lot longer than our previous turf.
Yeah, I'll defer to Brian. Do you have a number? 15 years.
The new turf will be 15 years.
Does that mean money will be allocated for 15 years to pay for the replacement?
So we'll have to look at a long-range maintenance plan along with other capital items that we would want to do over a 10 to 15-year period. I think definitely once you get into a 10-year window of replacement, that's when you start to need to identify that on a long-range plan. But that'd be a competing priority with just other items. So we would talk as a district about how we see that fitting within budget as we get closer.
And it's complete, correct?
So Jonathan, thank you. We budget, is it $200,000 annually for the maintenance budget? Is that what's in Fund 41?
Fund 41, $200,000 annually, and so this is multiple years of dollars being set aside to do this project.
So because of the referendum, Brian, your budget, you haven't had to use that $200,000, and typically we use that $200,000 for the roofing and things like that. You're not using it this year or next year for roofing or anything else, because a lot of the updates are being part of the referendum. So that $200,000 that we set aside to Fund 41 in the 18-19 budget and the 19-20 budget will help pay for that stadium turf.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah, that's important. I would assume most community members assume it's part of the referendum. So hopefully a lot of people are watching this. That question gets answered.
We hope they're watching as well.
Yeah. Does it make sense maybe to add that to our construction website, to have a little section for other updates, non-connected, just so people, if they go to that page, they see that bottom part that talks about other things that are happening?
Yeah, just like the presentation, I think we'll label that appropriately, just so there isn't confusion about it, but absolutely, we can do that.
He's already prepared some communication that's going to be going out in our next community notebook.
I haven't looked at the site in a bit. Are the slides that you had before with the way the rooms and the buildings were going to look, is that on the site for people to look at as well? Great.
Static renderings are up there right now. Tomorrow I'll be putting some links to the 3D renderings that Mike shared with us.
That's nice.
Right. And I would just, because I did have a few questions from like the College Park families, so I would say make sure to put that plan up, because I think some confusion around if it's the front or the back of the building, depending on who they talk to last in the community. So it'd be good to put that one.
Yeah, that'll also go. That was in the community notebook as well.
Okay.
All that information will get transposed onto the page.
Perfect. Megan or Emma, any questions that you guys have? I mean,
What do you think?
Can you hand them the microphone?
Yeah, let's give them a mic.
Especially the music wing, because I think the music wing is where I spent most of my time in high school, and to see it come back and to see it all different, I think I'll be kind of sad, but obviously it's for the better, so, yeah.
We can keep you for another year.
Everything.
I'm really looking forward to the courtyard. I know, like, being a freshman, I didn't even know what it was, and I think that it will be a really good opportunity to utilize the space with the glass lighting.
Good, thank you. Anything else regarding the facilities? And I think we're scheduled to hear facility updates a couple of times throughout the year as we progress. So thank you all for being here this evening.
Yeah,
Thank you very
Yes,
much.
thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you
Appreciate
for
your
your
time
time.
and collaboration with us.
Thank you.
All right. Next on the agenda is another update. So we've talked a little bit in the past year about student culture and climate, and Dr. Kiltz, and
Yes, Colleen is going to do this as her final official report on behalf of the district. So as soon as she pulls up her presentation, she's going to be sharing with you some of our key culture climate data, including some information from our parent and student surveys, as well as some baseline information regarding discipline.
Okay, we're just gonna get it.
Where's your mic?
Have to get it projected. So I think we'll just hold on a second. Need to scan it. Nothing? Do you know how to do this? Hold on. You need like a scan app or something. I just lost Chrome completely. It does that a lot. It just went away, my whole thing went away.
Who was here earlier? Dr. Smith? The gentleman that was here earlier. Dr. Smith. Is he here for the
Restarting.
Oh.
Can you just turn it back? Yeah. So while he's setting that up, one thing I did want to just point out before I begin is that in regard to the questions that were brought forward at the
Public comments.
Public comments, thank you. This report does not get into the very granular details of student discipline. It's a much more broad look at climate and culture and some of the data that we do have and the work that we're doing. So if there would be an interest in something that's much more specific to all the disciplinary data, I think that would be something to consider for going into the next school year.
While it's getting set up, I did like your culture and climate definitions.
Yes.
I think that can often get confused, and so thank you for making that very easy to understand.
Yes, I have a great video that I would show you if I could, but that might not be happening. So I don't know. Do I just begin without? Some of the highlights. Well, as the report explained, climate and culture; those terms tend to be used interchangeably. But there is some difference, and climate is more that day-to-day impact, the day-to-day things happening in a building. Culture is that longer-term, more in-depth feeling that a school or a district has. How people feel about where they go to school, and where they work, and where they send their kids to school. I did notice that in the literature that even some professionals will use it interchangeably. And one article that I read by the National School Climate Council really said, as long as you have a general understanding of the difference, I don't think we need to get too worried about whether you're calling it climate or culture. So in the past, when we've done this report, I believe this is the third or fourth year that we've had this report. I think it's the third year. Initially, we had really no data to support how we believe our students are feeling, and our staff and our parents. So we added a little bit about that in one of the most recent reports, but this year we decided we really wanted to pull in more of that information, more of that data. So what we looked at, as I said, I believe that the first year we did this was 2015. Dr. Strobel was our superintendent at that time. And I don't, my port doesn't work too well, so. Okay. And at that time, there was absolutely no data in the report. This year, though, we have a fair amount of data to help us determine what is the culture and climate, besides anecdotally and besides listing all of the things that we're doing to support a positive climate and culture, what does the data show us? So we used, this year we used the student engagement survey, the student participation data, and student discipline data. And for parents, we used the parent satisfaction survey and the staff Energage survey, which used to be called the Workplace Dynamics Survey. Thank you. All right. I was already feeling a little left out because I didn't have a cool, like, technology, virtual reality thing. I'm like, I'm not even going to have a
You're not going to pass around the glasses.
Jeez. I'm still not going to have my slideshow. I don't know. It's just, it's a sign. So things that are going well, if you look at the report, if you happen to have the report with you, I'm going to have you turn to the page 2, if you have your report with you. And what was interesting with what's going well with students, each of those top 3 items, there we go. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, you're, here, I got it. Okay. So if you look at those top three items from the student survey, those items was on at least one school. Each of those items was the top. So the high school, learning is important at my school, was the high school students' top response. My principal is a good leader was the top response for Canterbury and the middle school, and my teachers expect me to do my best all of the time was top for College Park and Highland View. But all 3 of those items made it somewhere in the top 3 for each school. So it was very consistent. It was interesting to see how consistent things were across the 5 buildings. Things that are highlighted in yellow are a decline, in many cases, very, very slight decline, and in green it was an increase, sometimes a slight increase, but still heading in the right direction. Opportunities for improvement. I think this is something that is definitely jumped out at all of us as administrators, that consistently across all 5 schools, the lowest score as ranked by the students is that the students are kind to each other at this school. So that will definitely be an area of focus, a continued area of focus in all 5 schools, because we certainly, that's certainly not an acceptable score for us. So it's something we'll be working on. Although it is a slight increase from last year, it's not a very significant increase.
I don't like the lunch.
Student participation is another way that we can measure the climate and culture of our school. The more engaged our students are, the more we can figure that they are feeling happy and comfortable in their environment. Those numbers, there's a little bit of a decrease, but it's pretty steady at both the high school and the middle school, with over 50% of our students participating in activities at both school levels.
Are those numbers collected at the end of the season or at the beginning?
End of the season.
Yeah, right. I took this from Jared's reports.
Nice.
From the end of the season.
Thank you.
So student discipline, one of the things that we discovered when I began collecting this data is that our buildings are using discipline data collection systems differently. So This data does not, for example, the elementary schools and the middle school only use PowerSchool if a student's actually being suspended. They don't use that to capture other office referrals if it didn't lead to suspension. The high school is using PowerSchool to collect that data for office referrals and suspensions. The middle school and College Park are using simply a Google Sheet to collect other office referral data, and Highland View and Canterbury are using Swiss, which is a data collection system that they can access because they are PBIS schools. So we have some inconsistency. We don't have a very easy way to pull that data and compare it school by school. So that is something that the administrative team is now working on with the goal for everyone to use PowerSchool and use it the same way. So just recently we met, Jonathan and I were talking about some of these challenges and some other possibilities in PowerSchool to track some things that we haven't been using PowerSchool for. So
is this like a system to track majors and minors kind of thing? Is that kind of what it's like? I know Swiss.
Swiss tracks majors and minors.
Right.
Right, and whether or not they'll track minors using PowerSchool, that we have not made that decision yet. So, typically, we would want the teachers to handle minors and not have that come to the office. So whether or not we would collect all of that information is something that they'll have to decide. But what we do know for sure is that we need something that's more consistent across the 5 buildings. So, the most common office referral is use of electronics, and that is one that the middle school does use PowerSchool to track that. So quite a bit of misuse of electronics, and that could be anything from being on a website that they shouldn't be on if they've found their way to something, a game when they're supposed to be working, or using their phones when they're not supposed to be on the phone. So that could really vary. And it's not, the reporting system is simply inappropriate use of electronics. As you could see in the data from the full report, suspensions increased at 4 out of our 5 schools, although certainly at the elementary level they're still quite low. The biggest thing that jumped out was that males and students with disabilities are the most likely to be suspended at disproportionate rates. For the most part, our other areas were pretty proportionate in the rate of suspension. One thing that I want to note, however, is that in some of the schools where there's very low numbers of suspensions, that can be skewed pretty easily. So one of our buildings didn't have a high number of suspensions. It appeared to be very disproportionate by race, but I know that most of those suspensions were one particular student who, when he arrived to our district, was not identified as needing special education, but once we were able to put services in place, the suspensions stopped. So there are some of those kind of anomalies to keep in mind.
It's likely some of those other districts, I assume, are not always reporting, or they have to report suspensions, right? That's a
They're
state-
supposed to.
They're supposed to. But they may be downplaying incidents to lead to. What is that?
They may not call it a suspension.
They may not call it a suspension.
They may not call it a suspension,
Okay.
right. So I wondered, how do we compare to other districts? Because simply telling you that we have had, 2.2% of our population has been suspended. I pulled this off of WISE data, this information. We're certainly much lower than the state, and I pulled a few of our comparables, and we're kind of a little bit we're on the lower end of those as well, kind of in the middle there.
What does that middle one say?
You can read them from left to right, so it says State, Greendale.
Yeah, State, Greendale, Elmbrook, Whitefish Bay, New Berlin, Pewaukee, and Greenfield.
I wasn't even putting that together.
Yeah, just to give you a sense of what does this look like compared to other districts. So it doesn't seem that we suspend at a terribly high rate when compared to other districts. So what do the parents say is going well? Quite a bit. They say quite a bit is going well. This is just district-wide. The information is available for all of this on a school-by-school basis, but for this report, we're just looking at the district-wide. And I think it speaks for itself. They're proud to say they have a student in our school. Learning is a high priority, and families are treated with respect, which I find is interesting because we have students saying that kids aren't kind to each other, but our parents are feeling respected, so that I think that is something to build off of. We have families and parents who care about treating one another respectfully, and I think that we can make some nice headway with our students as well. Opportunities for improvement. It's communication, taking advantage of the various communication channels available, but at 4.07, that's still pretty darn good. That's one of the lowest scores that we received. Then these two, receiving feedback from how well my student is learning, which is interesting because if they're taking advantage of those communication channels, but they're not really feeling like they're getting information about how their child is learning. I'm not sure where that disconnect is, so that's something that we'll need to learn a little bit more about. And then receiving positive phone calls, messages, or notes about my child from the school. That had gone up from the first time we did it. I think there was some emphasis on, hey, let's let those parents know, get those positive notes and phone calls out. A little bit of a decline, so it needs to be focused on again.
Do the teachers have individual voicemails through the district, or are I'm assuming a lot of their communication is through emails
Yeah.
and so forth, but do they actually have numbers the parents can call them directly?
Yes.
They do.
Mm-hmm. They do. Mm-hmm. So the other area, so we've talked a little bit about students, and we've talked a little bit about parents, and then of course the other really important group in the school climate and culture are staff. So I just pulled a little bit of information from the Workplace Dynamic Survey, or now it's called Energage. This is a piece that Gary had actually also shared with the administrative team recently. And really, these are things, if the arrow is on the left, we've seen a bit of an increase this year. If it's on the right, we've seen some decrease. And the items toward the top are the biggest drivers of engagement. So a job meeting or exceeding expectations, getting the training that they want, having flexibility to balance work and personal life, and then fair pay and benefits package.
What does the size of the circle indicate?
The size.
So left to right is the score, right?
Mm-hmm.
Correct. Okay.
Correct, yes. The size of the circle indicates the significance based on the positivity or negativity of that person's response. So with it being a bigger gray circle, it's telling you that people had mediocre responses to that and that there wasn't a significant positive or negative skew to their scores otherwise. The size of the circle is one of the most confusing parts of the survey.
And I'm not sure I understand it yet.
Yeah, I don't, and even like the red dot on that third one down, I was confused by that as well.
So the red dot on the third one down is telling us that that was a significantly lower score than what they saw in the other districts that took this survey. So the red indicates that it's a significant decline from other responses. That big green arrow on the bottom shows that it was a significant increase from our prior results the year before.
Interesting legend in general.
Mm-hmm. There are even more confusing charts that I left off. Okay. So we collect the information. You know, we're doing more about collecting that information and taking a look and asking some of those questions. But what do we do about it? Well, we've been doing things to promote a positive climate and culture in Greendale. And I'm just going to, I found this work by the National School Climate Council. If you do a Google search on school climate and council, you'll find school climate and culture. You'll find all sorts of articles and the top 3 things you can do to improve your climate and culture, the top 8 things, and so I went with 5. I went with the article that had 5 and actually a reputable source. So most of these initiatives and these projects have really been addressed through other reports in the past school year and the Panther Pride report, so I'm not getting into great detail. I think if there's something that any of the board members is really interested in learning more about, that would be something that we could address in the coming school year. So first of all, having that shared vision and plan, and when I look at our Vision 2020 and the work that's gone on around that Vision 2020, it really does support the very things that you would expect if you were going to have a positive school climate and culture, the voice and choice of students, increasing student engagement, increasing student sense of purpose. And in our district, unlike, I've worked in a number of districts, and I can't say it's always the case that when a strategic plan is developed, that it's really revisited and the work centers around it, but that really is the case in Greendale. So I think that alone sets that foundation for building a positive school climate and culture. The other thing that we've done is we've implemented these systems to measure school climate. Right? We realized we really didn't have much besides our anecdotal and our feelings about how things are going. We put those things in place, and we're willing to take that risk of asking those questions, like sending out the Energage survey, sending out the parent and student surveys. There's some risk involved in that. Being willing to do that, and then responding to those things. So setting things in the scorecard, for example, about increasing the sense of belonging, increasing the My Manager score, and from that the staff survey, increasing parent satisfaction. So we're willing to take the risk, test the question, and when we get the answers, we try to do the work to improve our results. Number 2, setting policies to develop the social, emotional, ethical, civic, intellectual skills. And the other big piece of this is really doing what we can to reduce the barriers to learning and re-engaging students who have become disengaged. So we do things like the project-based learning, ACP, where we've removed barriers to higher level courses, college level coursework. We have multiple systems of support in place for our students, from reading specialists. We have our access program at the high school. We have grants for park and rec participation. We've really taken an active role in trying to reduce barriers as we see them occur, and looking to partner with other resources as well to make that happen. Number 3, those key supports that this is a wide list of indicators of a positive social emotional climate. We have really put enough emphasis on developing the social emotional learning skills of students. You've heard a report on that. You'll be hearing more about that going forward. We are committed to inclusive classrooms as reflected by the professional development that we provide, by the expectations our administrators hold, and really by the support that we get from the community and the board on keeping caseloads manageable as possible, and keeping class sizes low. All of those things support inclusive classrooms. We've done things such as implemented sources of strength. We will be implementing that at the middle school. Our schools are using restorative practices to address barriers and re-engage students. We're implementing Playworks this fall with all of our elementary schools. And then the physical enhancements, which you just heard a lot about that tonight. All of those things that contribute to a positive positive school climate and culture. And then the last 2, I'm going to group those together, that environment where all members are welcome, and we develop meaningful and engaging practices. I think in no way are we claiming that we have met the goal. I'm not sure anyone ever does meet the goal. I think when you make great progress, then you set another goal. But the things that we're doing to try to improve in these areas things like our equity team within the school district. That's providing district-wide and school-wide professional development. We have student voice and leadership in a number of areas, including the work we're doing around equity, the community conversations, Playworks, social sources of strength, and all of those pieces that come together to create that positive positive school climate and culture. So that's a pretty brief overview of the full report. Just wanted to highlight a few of the things, and I'm wondering what questions you have.
Thank you, Colleen. What questions does the board have?
On the survey, is there any, for instance, on the parent survey, would there be any spot that when we did the survey where parents could give comments or feedback?
Yeah, yes, we do have that. Yes. Mm-hmm. So that'd be something you'd be interested in seeing. Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I think we talked about this maybe once before, but I was trying to refresh my memory around the massive drop we saw in the parent response rate. And I don't know if we've found out why that was, or we went from 700 and something to 400 and some respondents.
I don't know why. I noticed that as well, but I don't know why it dropped. So that would be something we can look into as well.
It's interesting because ultimately 2017, 18, 19, very similar numbers that come across, even though our sample size is completely different.
Mm-hmm.
But so the folks that filled it out seem to be representative of the folks that filled it out in the past, even though it's a much smaller sample size.
Mm-hmm.
Anything from our students that was interesting or surprised you or caught your attention?
Not necessarily. I guess just the whole time I'm thinking about the kids that did respond negatively and just staying focused on there is a lot more to do.
Mm-hmm.
For the parent survey, how do parents get contacted, like to take it?
Good question.
That goes out in an email?
It's a school messenger that Kitty Goya handles for us, and it gets sent to every single parent through the email address that they provide us.
Okay, thank you.
With the student satisfaction survey, is there a way that you aggregate out different groups, like ethnic groups or?
I don't believe so.
There's not. Is there a way to do
no,
that?
Because I had asked earlier about that, and there isn't, because it's anonymous.
Right.
And I don't believe they have that question on their survey.
They don't.
In fact, right, they do not. They do not have that on their survey. Mm-hmm.
This is a Studer survey.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any input on what is that a?
We just haven't asked the demographic information. We certainly can.
I think that would be helpful. Just so we make sure we're reaching all populations.
I agree. Right, I agree. I think it would be the next piece. When we say that we've started to look more closely at data, I think that would absolutely be the next piece, because we can't disaggregate it in any way,
right?
Except by school,
right? And there's a likely chance that some students did not take the survey too. Right?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. So the majority of kids took it because they took it during class. So, unless somebody opted not to take it.
Yeah, we had a large size of students, over 1,200.
Well, that's good.
Thank you. I think this is important information. We heard earlier in the evening that we haven't done anything in the past year. Well, I think this report is a good indication that there has been a focus. We are using data to help navigate us through this. You made the comment earlier that we aren't perfect. No one is claiming that we're perfect or solved all the problems. But I think this is a good start, that it informs our decisions, it informs the discussions that we have. So thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to say along with that, Jill, that when I was selecting just some of the highlights to touch upon, it was somewhat difficult to limit it, because in addition to some of these bigger things like sources of strength and Playworks and restorative practices, those bigger things, there are a lot of smaller things going on in every building. So like College Park, they do a book a month around kindness and getting along with others. Like there's so much going on that's not necessarily readily visible, that it was actually hard to narrow it down.
Yeah, great report. I mean, I'm disappointed that the community member that shared her concerns was unable to stick around for the report, but perhaps the video will be able to, or the report will be a way to gain some information.
Could I just add, this is your last formal report. I really appreciate the thoroughness that you've done. This data is not easy to all compile. My understanding is you have to go through different sources and so forth to do this. So I just want to thank you for all your thorough reports that we've been receiving.
You're welcome.
May I just ask what you mean by restorative practices?
Yes, so it's something you might not have been involved in. So let's say there is a disagreement between some students, and there's a process. I'm not trained in it, but it's restorative practices or restorative circles. We have staff who are trained in leading that. For example, Ms. Kilpin is trained in leading that, and it would be bringing those parties together, and they would have a format for how they would share. So if I did something mean to you, or I was disrespectful to you, or you would share the impact my behavior had on you, and I would be willing to, I would have agreed to come to the circle to listen, and then we try to build a positive relationship back together again.
Is that used at the high school?
A little bit, definitely, yep.
Was this what Dr. Smith and like Dr. Mutri were talking about? Was that put in place because of them?
It was not put in place because of them, because it was in place prior.
Okay.
But that was an instance when it was utilized.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
One last question. I was just curious, I know like you said, this is only a portion of the data, but were there other things that, and since we're still on the track to kind of get apples and apples versus apples and oranges and other types of data, were there any conflicting points of data that you saw when you were going through this? I mean, it seems like it tells the same story in the pieces that we're seeing, but I was just curious if there's anything that stood out to you.
No, nothing stood out to me.
Yeah. And like similarly to like the parent piece that you mentioned, that was a good point. You know, the
Right,
parents
I mean,
were
that was
saying
one that stood out to me.
it's really high, and the students are saying, I feel a little bit less so.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yes.
thanks.
All right, any other questions? All right, then we'll continue on. The next item on the agenda is the 2018-19 district scorecard. So this is something that was set almost a year ago, and we'll be doing a similar process for the 19-20 school year. But this is a way to measure where we are at with things, to highlight areas that we've met expectations, to highlight areas where we still have work to do, and to have this conversation with the community so that they know what we're accomplishing and where we still have open items that we want to work on.
So the idea behind the scorecard is really to set audacious goals, to set goals that really push us to be better than what we are currently. And so when you take a look at the goals that the board had discussion around and approved last fall, all of these were priority goals that were being set around areas of need, high need, and where we were really stretching ourselves with the goal metric that we were setting moving forward. So what you'll see with many of these goals is while we made some improvements, we didn't reach the threshold that we set with that goal because, again, we were setting audacious goals. When we take a look at really the model that we use around the scorecard, we've had some conversation around the evidence-based leadership model. And that model really takes us through a pathway to improving organizations, with the first part of that pathway being measuring what matters. The scorecard represents what matters for us for the 2018-2019 school year. And then around that, making sure that we're putting into place professional development, capacity building for our staff to do the right work then to help improve these measures moving forward. And so a lot of times without that scorecard, you get hope as the planning opportunity, as the strategy, rather than really learning as the strategy. So over the course of last year, you heard 3 different opportunities from our building administrators, from our division directors, what they were doing around those short cycles to try to impact these goals as well. And they did that through a process, an improvement process, using Plan, Do, Study, Act. So every 60 days, they're meeting with their teams related to the goals that they've cascaded around this scorecard and doing some planning, maybe implementing something new, studying the impact that has on either teacher, parent, or student impact. And then based upon that, do we look to scale? Do we eliminate that because it didn't really hit the mark and move on to the next priority we may have? So using that Plan, Do, Study, Act really around those short cycles to help us get to the end goals that we set on the scorecard. We've also made sure that the scorecard aligns with our strategic priorities. So we have pillars that have been identified on this scorecard that match with those strategic priorities, whether it's around college readiness and that career pathway work, project-based learning to personalize the learning, or the youth engagement. We've added a fourth pillar around service, especially with our district services staff members like HR, business services. Their job is to make sure that they're serving our teachers, our students, and eliminating any barriers that may exist. So based upon that information then, a review of our scorecard for 2018-19 reveals a couple of things, a couple of areas to celebrate that we've heard about a little bit from other reports. One is around the training initial implementation of project-based learning. Last year was our first year of the launch. And during that first year, we trained 62% of our teachers with Project-Based Learning 101, and those teachers implemented initial projects. We did coaching throughout the year to help them improve those projects as well, and we're looking forward to this year. Moving forward, we've done some initial training this summer with teachers who haven't gone through that Project-Based Learning 101, so we're looking forward to more teachers implementing across the system this year. And then we had 80% of our tech committee ready to support project-based learning with training on relevant technology tools. So what we want to, Mr. Misko's point that he made earlier, how are we going to be using this library space? It's really to make sure that students have the opportunities to collaborate, to problem solve around these project-based learning activities and lessons that they're going through, and then using tech tools, using like the small study areas that Michael Hacker talked about, and being able to collaborate using the monitor in there around a project that they're putting together, whether it's a video project or an audio project that they may be putting together. So through those tech tools and the tech committee doing some of that training over the course of this next year, we're hoping that we can build on the success of this first year using those technology tools. The other area where we saw some impact was around career pathway and the benefits of ACP. 2 years ago was our first year of implementation. We learned a lot from that first year of implementation, and you can see that students responded. While it's not a high score yet, we moved from a 2.58 to a 2.83 on the benefits of that post-high school planning through the ACP, and we'll learn from the feedback we're getting and continue to improve that and hopefully integrate it more into some authentic experiences with students around those career pathways. And then the student survey score going from a 3.79 to a 3.82 around feeling like they're engaged in purposeful, worthwhile work. While we didn't quite hit the mark we wanted, it still was an increase that we saw overall on the student score. Another area to celebrate is just the overall parent satisfaction. We've increased that mean score from 4.27 to 4.35. Colleen shared some of the more specifics and areas that we've seen some growth and real strength from that parent satisfaction survey. Special education, the work that Colleen has done with her team. 2 years ago, we didn't have a sense of even what percentage of goals were being met on the IEP. Last year, Colleen took on the audacious task of looking at that, discovered that 35% of those IEP goals were being met, and with the work, professional development that's been done, we've increased that to 59% of those IEP goals being met. So significant improvement. We still have some work to do yet, right? So always that next step for improvement. And then finally around engagement with Park and Rec, satisfaction with the programs. We're consistently on 93-94% of the respondents indicating they're satisfied with the program. We want to dig into that a little bit more. We've done some work with the online process and registering online. We want to get some feedback, next steps on how's that online process going And what would you encourage you to use that online process moving forward? We're at about 52, 53% of our clients using that online program. We'd like to extend that to 70% plus, so that the team doesn't have to do rework then in entering those when those paper registration forms come in. Opportunities for improvement that came through the scorecard this year, the employee engagement and recognition. When you look at the trend scores the last 3 years, we started at 4.43, moved down to a 4.38. This last year, we were at a 4.24. This isn't unexpected, because as you're putting in some change processes, when you're doing things around inclusive practices, when you're doing things around student engagement and project-based learning, you're pushing the envelope and the comfort of teachers, and a lot of people don't like that discomfort. Doesn't mean we stop what we're doing. It's just a matter of what do we need to do in terms of supporting teachers and feeling like they've got that appropriate balance. One of the items she shared was just around that flexibility and feeling like you've got a work-life balance. We've got to have some conversations around what does that look like and try to improve those types of scores. We also noticed with this that some of the pieces around my manager and that culture around feeling supported, feeling like they're listened to. We need to commit to some of the leadership tactics, like the leadership check-ins that we're asking our team to do, like the recognition reward. And I think engaging in those tactics and doing more team accountability through some of our meetings will help us with that employee engagement and recognition moving forward as well. We've also seen that around closing the achievement gaps at the elementary level, really looking at students who are a minority around reading and math. We've seen a drop in the percentage of students who are either hitting that benchmark score for grade level or making accelerated progress. So we've got to come back to that and have some conversations around what may be happening. Are there some gaps with even the material we're using that may have some cultural inequities associated with it? So that's an area we need to explore and look at with our equity team, implementing some of the strategies that come through that integrated comprehensive services model. We've also, around reading for understanding from 7th to 10th grade, looking at that transition from 8th to 9th grade, we're seeing a drop in those reading scores, especially with the ACT, Aspire ACT. And so looking at what we may be able to do to beef up that reading for understanding across the middle school grades, 7th, 8th grade, that align really with the ACT, Aspire, and college career readiness standards that are in place. And so Kim is going to be engaging in some of that work and starting to do that crossover with the college career readiness standards and building those down into the middle school level. And then the final one is around board engagement with the community. We had a great board work session earlier in the summer here, and so just around some of those strategies that we're going to be putting into place with engagement with our PTOs, with different community organizations, and making sure that the board is involved in some of the those committee and organizational meetings that I've been a part of, and being part of the conversation, I think will help with that board engagement with the community as well. So it gives you a sense of some of the opportunities for improvement. What I do want to share out real quickly is just looking at the 3-year averages around some of these, around the purposeful, worthwhile work. We have a series of 7 questions on the student survey that really target that purposeful, worthwhile work, anything from setting learning goals to my teachers ask me how I learn best. And what you see is a slight increase in the majority of these scores, 6 out of 7, slight decrease in I feel the things I'm learning are important to my future success. So you've seen that come down, but the other ones coming up just a little bit around purposeful, worthwhile work. So while we would have liked to have seen greater increase in scores, we saw a slight increase overall. Around student sense of belonging, there are 8 questions that are part of the student survey tied into the sense of belonging and care. Anything from my teacher cares about me to my family is treated with respect at my school to I feel like I belong. When you take a look at these scores as well, 6 of the 8 had an increase in score. The couple that saw a drop included school expectations are fair. And then the other one that dropped slightly was teachers are available when I need them, I think was the other one that dropped a little bit. Yes, that was the one that dropped a little bit. but not too much. Overall, again, the score increased slightly from 2018 to 2019. STAR reading scores, what I want to share with you here is, first of all, this takes a look at the percent that are proficient. And what you see is overall an increase at 2 of the 3 elementary schools. Middle school, pretty flat. Total, pretty flat overall. But what I want to share with you at the elementary school is where students are starting. Because these overall scores only tell part of the picture, right? And when you take a look at 17, fall of 17 to spring 18, saw Canterbury increase the percentage of students by 7 points, College Park 19 points, Highland View by 6 points. When you look at fall 18 to fall of 19, and you look at the overall growth, a little more consistency, a little greater increase, right? When you take a look at the overall scores of our students in fall of 18 compared to fall of 17, they weren't as proficient, especially at Highland View. We saw a major shift, especially an influx of new students coming in.
Yeah.
So I think we need to understand this as well. While Highland View may not have as high a percentage of students hitting that benchmark score that we're expecting at grade level, when you look at the overall growth and pulling 20% more students to that proficient level, that's pretty impressive. And if I showed you growth scores, it would tell you really the tremendous growth that they're showing at Highland View as well. All of our schools do a really great job, but I think sometimes Highland View, because they've trended behind a little bit, people don't understand this and where students are starting at. Same with STAR math scores. Similar type of trend here, where we saw a slight decrease from one year over to the other from Highland View in the middle school. But again, when you take a look at starting points, Highland View back in 17 had 65% of their students already at that benchmark score. This, in fall of 2018, they're at 51%. And they're able to grow from 51% of the students at that proficiency level to 70%. So again, tremendous growth in math across all 3 of our elementary schools. Co-curricular participation, this was talked about. We're seeing an increase every single year at the secondary level. So really proud of the opportunities there. Around ACT proficiency, what we're seeing here, if you look at the class of 2018, 2019, 2020, you're seeing a nice increase in the percentage of students who are getting to that proficient score in reading and in math. If you go horizontally, the class of 2019, you see the 11th grade score and then 12th grade score. So we see a slight increase in the percent of students hitting that reading threshold and a consistent number at 56% hitting that math proficiency. So high school's been doing a lot of work around that alignment. I think we're seeing some of the fruits of that labor in some of the increased scores here at 11th grade. I'm not going to go into the parent trends because Colleen shared the parent trends as well as the celebrations related to the parent survey. Student survey, the same thing. She shared some of that as part of her report, the celebrations, as well as the opportunities for improvement. She also shared out the staff engagement work. And the only other note I would put with this is you see sort of a grayed out area in the middle. The left side of that grayed out area would be the 33rd percentile, all the way up to the 66th percentile. So that's sort of your median area. The first line to the left of that then would be the 0 percentile. The line to the right would be your 99th percentile. So it gives you a sense, too, of where we're falling with some of these. I also want to remind you that with the Energage survey, this is a select group of districts and businesses. These are businesses that are committed to improvement and districts that are committed to improvement. Not every district or organization goes through the Energage or the Workplace Dynamics survey. It's businesses and organizations that are really looking at benchmarking themselves with the best of the best and trying to improve from there. So when you take a look at our scores representative of the best, we've got some work to do, and we acknowledge that. When you take a look, first of all, at some of the My Manager, I talked about this, and tying it back to some of the tactics, leadership tactics that we've been learning, those are the commitments that will help us drive those scores and improve the percentile position that we're in. This is the basics, so Colleen, I believe, shared this one, so it gives you a sense of where we are. Overall with this, we fall within that median range, and this is around business outcomes, so recommend working at Greendale. School district is around that 50th percentile. Motivates me to give my very best is around that 33rd, 34th percentile. Not considered searching for a better job in the past month is around that 33rd, 34th percentile. So again, in comparison to the best of the best, we've got some work to do if we want to be one of the best. So where do we want to be for the end of the 2019-2020 school year? What we will be sharing with you at the next board meeting is a scorecard for 2019-2020. Some of the areas that we shared with you that are areas, opportunities for improvement, are going to be built into that next scorecard. Some of the areas that are celebrations, if we've seen a consistent trend, we may be pulling those off because those are no longer audacious goals. To have Park and Rec on here in their satisfaction survey probably doesn't make sense. We're already performing at a high level at that 94% of satisfaction. We'll pull that off and we'll look for other priorities that will help drive improvement and help us get better as an organization. So with that, I'll take any questions or concerns or comments. It doesn't have to be a concern, it can just be a comment.
One question I had was, as I was looking through this piece, and I'm thinking about the future, I know project-based learning is a priority, and I think there was essentially a 7.5% weight on project-based learning as part of this. So I wasn't sure if that's, how that's going to be looked at as we move into the next review, as that being one of our strategic priorities.
Right, so part of the challenge of this is those weights, and if as an organization or a system we have 10 to 15 goals, you've got to decide where you're going to put those weights. And the board, I think, when this was being considered last fall, put it probably in the right place around student achievement, looking at closing the gap. Overall achievement was 25% to the overall.
If you add up the
weighting.
college and career, it was 40%.
Okay, 40%. So that will be part of the conversation when we share out that scorecard for 2019-2020 is where we want to place those weights. Part of the project-based learning one that we'll be talking or setting a goal around is student experience with project-based learning activities. So now we not only want it to be around teacher professional development, we want to see the impact it's having on students and those engagement levels.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, looking at the stuff, Kim, you presented earlier, there's some phenomenal movement that we're seeing happening across the different approaches to project-based or personalized learning. It's happening, so I think that should be a interesting opportunity to see the fruits of the labor that's been engaged and connected with the faculty and staff here. So.
Absolutely agree with you.
Any other comments or questions as we review this last year, this past school year?
Emma and Reagan, anything that surprises you from what I shared?
I think it's good to see how the test scores are going up. I didn't know that they increased by that much.
I guess a comment with trying to measure how project-based learning is like getting to students. I think a lot of times kids don't really recognize that they are project-based learning. So that's just a part of it, because I know like when I'm in the classroom doing like a lab or something like that, I don't really recognize the thought that's behind that. So that's something to keep in mind with the scorecards.
Having that common vocabulary so that people understand that what you're doing is intended to be self-directed and self-motivated. Interesting. Good comment. All right. Seeing no other questions, then we'll continue on. Next item on the agenda is an annual item for WASB resolutions. So in January at the WASB convention, there's a delegate assembly, and I think, Kathy, you've participated in that in the past. So each year around this time, WASB asks school boards if they intend or if they would like to submit resolutions that would then be reviewed by that resolution committee and then brought forward to the delegate assembly. So this is an annual discussion to see if there's anything that we as the Greendale School District are looking, or the Greendale Board of Education are looking to provide to WSB for consideration for a resolution. And we typically haven't done this we have not submitted resolutions in the past. In January, we do, as a board, vote on any resolutions that are brought forward, so that whoever is attending that convention votes in accordance with the direction of the board. But again, want to just have people have an opportunity to bring forward any resolutions.
Joan, just for clarification, WASB has several resolutions currently in place and available for board members to review. It doesn't necessarily have to be a new resolution. It could be offering a change to a current resolution as well.
Correct.
I haven't really found the exact place for this, but I'm looking under safe schools with healthy schools. I would like to see us have some voice in the mental health services as they pertain to any of these resolutions. I think that's one area we've talked about. The state is kind of lacking in helping support that area, and I think collectively as a state we need to voice that.
Is there a policy committee meeting happening?
Chapter 6.
September, before our first meeting in September.
Perhaps the policy committee could take a look and see if there are any resolutions that address mental health.
I was just looking, there are actually.
Okay.
And I'm still learning this touch screen here. All right, so it's chapter 6.06 does discuss mental health supports.
Okay.
So I think, that would maybe be a place for us to look if everyone else is in agreement.
Just to make sure that everything is covered.
Right.
Or if there's an additional voice that we're looking for.
Well, even with the grants that they were offering up, like through the safety grants, a lot of it was for I don't want to say superficial, but it was for the cameras and the doors and all that. But really dealing with the actual student and dealing with the source where it's starting rather than reactive, I think is approach we really should be taking to get the support for the students before it becomes a problem.
Agreed.
Right. So perhaps the policy committee could take a look at that to see if there is anything that we would like to do. Resolutions must be submitted by September 15th, WASB. So there is an opportunity, but like you said, it needs to be done within the next month and a half.
We could pull together a special committee meeting too to look.
Yeah, I think we'd almost need to, because otherwise we wouldn't have time to actually review it.
Correct.
If we brought it,
When is the next policy meeting?
Until September. Yeah,
First.
Before our first meeting in
Okay.
September.
Yeah.
We'll set up something.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I'll read
Any other resolutions that come to mind?
I didn't see any off the top of my head, but I know that I'm second meeting in, so my thought process is, keep an eye on this as we move through this year and see if there's things that we really want to highlight. So there's definitely a list of things that we're going through on the policy, so.
And you're right, this is a learning process. My first year, I wasn't really quite clear on it, but now that I've sat through the delegate assemblies and listened to other districts get up and advocate, I kind of have a feel, but, we as a board obviously make those decisions, so good.
Right. I think the WASB does a nice job of advocating on our behalf to the state legislature, and this is just providing that input to the WASB to continue that advocacy.
Right. It's not changing any laws, it's actually just advocating for what we need.
So that as legislation does come up, they will, try to advocate for or against certain legislation that may be aligned with a resolution that already exists. Okay. All right, then we'll continue on. We're at the end of the agenda. Any additional comments from visitors this evening?
Laura Miller, 5234 Lakeside Drive. And I just wanted to clarify why Deanna is not here is because she is a single parent with a child and 2 foster children, and they depend on her, and she gives as much as she can to come here for the little amount of time that she does come. And she got a substitute for herself for the other meeting, which was scheduled for the same time as this time, and we're also here supporting her. So you should think about when you criticize somebody for not being here, and she'll be watching everything on YouTube. So I just wanted to make that clarification.
Thank you.
All right, I'll try and be really brief. I just was wondering if one of the WASB recommendations that potentially we could look into is encouraging the state to refund the Chapter 220 program. But I don't know if it's there, but it is something to look at. And also, I really enjoyed seeing all of the remodeling ideas, really fantastic ideas. And there was one thing that I did want to bring up, just to ensure that transgender and gender fluid student, staff, and community members are accommodated. It's always easier to do in the planning stages. And honestly, I have no idea. Our middle schools, our high school may already have all gender inclusive bathrooms, but that would just be something to kind of double check maybe with the developers and make sure that there are those available and that they have clear signage for just making sure. I know a lot of districts are addressing this. I know that some states are actually requiring it, of all single stall restrooms to be labeled as gender inclusive. But just to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our students, staff, and visitors. Also, as you do policy review, I think right now it's really wonderful that our Series 400, the discriminatory, prohibition on discrimination, does include sexual orientation, which is fantastic. Might be something to also include looking at gender identity as adding to one of those protected areas. I think it's 411. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you for your feedback.
Just want to thank all of you for what an amazing job you guys are doing. I know, I assume you guys get paid something, right? Is that correct? I don't know. School
There
board?
is an annual salary.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, it's minimal. Okay. So
it's not as high as the Board of Trustees.
But I've talked to your superintendent about that. So thank you for all you do. I mean, this was a long meeting, and really a lot of this you do because you care, and you care for the community, and the community sees what you do, and we all appreciate it. So thank you, everybody that's up here. Thanks for the amazing report you put on. I hope you do well in your next endeavors. So I just want to say thank you to everybody. I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Seeing no additional comments, we are adjourned, and our next board meeting is in 2 weeks on Monday, August 19th.
First day of school.